Dr. Jim Chan, naturopathic physician. Well, the initial is really ND, not MD. Anyways, some people call me Jimmy. It's interesting how I get into naturopathic medicine. In fact, my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, they were all practitioners of medicine, but of traditional Chinese medicine. Of course, they all my grandfather, great-grandfather, they both practiced in China, and my father practiced in Hong Kong. And as a teenager, my father actually had trained me in various aspects of traditional Chinese medicine and herbal medicine. And by the time I was 19 years old, he already put me through a training program in traditional Chinese medicine. Except back then, of course, I didn't like the idea of traditional Chinese medicine, the fact that they only talk about yin and yang, and I thought it was kind of some sort of a superstition. So instead I ran away from home, and I ended up in Canada, and I ended up in Medicine Hat, Alberta, a small town in the middle of Canada, and I found a program that I could afford in a hospital, in Medicine Hat General Hospital. And after having gone through a one-year training program in the Institute of Technology called SAIT in Calgary, I ended up going back to Medicine Hat General Hospital and had my practical training there. Yeah, and another, one way of handling cancer, the way I learned it learned about it was very interesting. When I was traveling in China, I found out that there was a case in a very remote area in China, and the kid was a 7-year-old kid with osteosarcoma in the hip. And as we know, there's really not very good treatment for it. Sadly, this is in a very remote area. And the kid was destined for a very ill fate. So in desperation, the family found a doctor who turned out to be a retired doctor from the army who's really an orthopedic surgeon. And of course, as we know, hip replacement is a dime a dozen. These operations are done so successfully nowadays. It's really an easy thing to do. And this orthopedic surgeon decided to do something that's literally groundbreaking. And this is a story that's not published or anything. And when I heard about it, I went in and talked to this guy and taught and interviewed the kid. It's just incredible. What he did was he took the hip out of this kid, the hip, just like a hip replacement, and he threw the hip into a pot of boiling water and he cooked the hip. And after much cooking, he actually dried the hip and he put the hip back in, just like a hip replacement. So instead of replacing it with a piece of prosthesis, he's replacing it with a piece of cooked hip. No big deal. It's perfect fit, because how can you find a better fit? And guess what? Of course, he drew some bone marrow from the other hip and stuck the marrow into the center of this prosthesis, the cooked hip. And the kid lived. There's no cancer. And today the kid is still alive. So it prompted me into a very interesting therapy called hyperthermia treatment. Anyways, when I traveled to Japan, I found out there was a Dr. Niwa who has a wonderful hospital that does nothing but alternative cancer treatment in the southern part of Japan. And one of the treatments that he mandated his patients do is to bury themselves in a pot of hot sand once a day for 8 minutes. And it's so hot that when I was buried in there for 8 minutes, my whole body was throbbing. So I said, if this is not going to cook the cancer, what is going to? Of course, if I was ready to import some of its magical sand that can retain the heat to Vancouver, but I thought the health department might not like it, because I was just about to do what I didn't want to do when I was buried in the hot sand pit, So I said, gee, what am I supposed to do? And wonderfully, I came across something called peat hyperthermia therapy, that I can use some peat preparation, because as we know, peat has a very high molecular weight and is a carbon complex that's made from hundreds of, or at least 40,000 years of fermentation of vegetation from the center of the earth, that can absorb the heat very efficiently and release the heat very slowly to basically cook whatever's in the heat. That's how come you can have a fire in a bog and you can never put it out, because of the high efficiency of storing the heat. Anyway, so what I've done nowadays, incorporated in the cancer treatment, is to make patients go through this peat bath therapy. So I built a whole bunch of 4 7-foot bathtubs, and I'll get the staff to adjust the bath temperature so that it's at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very hot. And usually when you step into a bath water that hot, you're going to get scorched. So when we mix this peat material into the bath water, when patients step in, there's no problem, as long as they stay still. Of course, someone has to be there to monitor their heart rate very carefully. As soon as their heart rate reaches 120, we'll pull them out and we'll, wrap them up so that they can rest. And of course, because of the raising of the core temperature, I know, because they will sweat profusely for literally anything from half an hour to sometimes up to 2 hours. And I know that I can raise the core body temperature up to at least 39 and sometimes 39.5 or 39.8, pushing it for the strong guys. We managed to raise it to 40 degrees Celsius, which is very dramatic. And we know that heat can induce the white blood cells in our body to produce a protein called heat shock protein, and especially heat shock protein 46. We know that this is very instrumental in helping our immune system attack the cancer cells. And so this is a therapy that we do in our clinic. In coupling with that, we also do excorporeal alpha interferon natural killer cell activation. So what we do is, while the patient is being heated up in an infrared chamber, we will do phlebotomy and let out 200 cc's of blood. We will mix this blood with alpha interferon, and the blood is infused back into the person while the person is undergoing this hyperthermia treatment. Of course, the core body temperature might not rise as drastically as the peat hyperthermia therapy. And of course, in our clinic, we also do photooxidation ultraviolet light therapy. I use a unit that I brought over from China that the ultraviolet light source literally heats up to about 300 degrees Celsius. Of course, we're going to need all kinds of fans blowing on the blood bag to make sure we don't cook the blood. And at the same time, we have an ozone flow by to ozonate the blood continuously for 15 minutes. We have treated a number of non-Hodgkin cases quite successfully without chemotherapy. I wouldn't say I would use that as a primary treatment for a lot of non-Hodgkin cases, but when the odd case when we see fit to put them through a course of treatment, we have seen very obvious reduction of the size of the lymph nodes. Anyways, other than that, of course, we do your ozone treatment, including direct injection of ozone if it's necessary. Of course, it's kind of scary. And we also do rectal insufflation. We do ozone steam sauna, and we also do IV ozone therapy, meaning we mix the ozone in the blood in a bottle, and we infuse that back into the person. But then again, there's no cookbook approach. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take a very thorough history, review all of the clinical evidence and records, and go ahead and do a very thorough survey and investigation in terms of what the immune system is like, what kind of terrain are we talking about, what kind of possible causative agent can we identify, to go ahead and make a decision in terms of what our strategy might be, and go ahead and prioritize very carefully whether we need to attack, support, or which needs to come first in order to lay down the program for the patient and hope for the best. And of course, without closing our mind entirely to some of the more drastic conventional treatments could really be part of our alternative treatment, you know, or whether we be complementary or they be complementary. I think it's a matter of what we want to call it, and make it to be the best in the patient's favor. That's all. 12 minutes not up yet?
You got 3 minutes left.
I got 3 minutes left. Well, I certainly look forward to one day allowing to have all these complementary and alternative medicine to be incorporated into what we call the mainstream medicine. Really, what we're talking about is the recognition by the third-party reimbursement system. In fact, a lot of times, if we take a very non-threatening approach, that we can work together and see each other eye to eye, you know, I think it would be a wonderful world, you know, in medicine. Opportunity to be exposed to a lot of conventional medical procedures and testings and things like that. And at that point, a pathologist who was on staff was really keen on getting me to go down to the morgue to help him. So I ended up doing a lot of autopsies back then, and that was a lot of fun. So in fact, I was all gung-ho to say, hey, I'm, instead of doing anything that's traditional medicine, which I didn't think had any validity, I was all enthusiastic into going into conventional medicine. And in fact, being a medical technology did not satisfy my desire for knowing what's going on, so I ended up enrolling in a program in biochemistry in Simon Fraser University in Vancouver. And at the same time, I worked part-time in a hospital, in Peace Arch Hospital. And interestingly enough, nobody else wanted to work the odd shift, so I ended up working, literally being on call 24 hours a day for 4 days a week. And I had to get up first thing in the morning, every morning, to draw blood from these wonderful patients. And an internist, Dr. Greiner, decided that I was maybe a little smarter than some of the other technologists, and decided to take me around on ward rounds. And actually it was, a good almost 7 years. He took me around on ward rounds every morning and showed me how to read everything from electrocardiogram, interpret lab results and things like that. And it's interesting that back then I was all ready to go to medical school. And also interesting was that I got interested in doing research with my professor in biochemistry in Simon Fraser. And before I graduated, I was involved in a research project to figure out the ping-pong mechanism of S-adenosyl methionine methyltransferase, a mouthful. But it's very interesting work, and that was when I learned more about molecular biology and biochemistry and enzyme kinetics and all the ins and outs of things. And I came across something that was quite interesting that I thought maybe I wanted to look into it. And I got a President's Grant to do research in ginseng. And I read a paper from Russia that was translated into English that ginseng was somewhat useful in treating diabetes. So I said, well, why don't I do something? So with my Chinese medicine background, maybe it's useful to look into it, maybe I can disprove it. So turned out that I got this research grant, and I constructed a bilayer lipid membrane, and I extracted fractions of so-called ginsenoside from ginseng and look at its effect on the transport of glucose across the bilayer lipid membrane that was artificially constructed. And my goodness, I found positive results, and it got me really interested into maybe looking into other herbs. However, at that point, I was ready to either go on to a PhD program, because my professor managed to put my name on this paper that was published, and also perhaps to go into medical school. Excuse me. And at that point, I suffered from a very severe problem that everybody suffered, was very severe hay fever. And of course, being very much involved with conventional medicine, it was regular treatment to be on prednisone, to have taken massive amount of antihistamine rotating through them all, you name it, Ultravin, I've tried all of them. And I even had 4 years of allergy shots with the serum. And guess what? My conclusion is, goodness, if I want to go into medicine, this is pretty sad because I've tried everything and it's not helping me. And I was still ready. I still had to carry a knapsack of Kleenex to go to school. And in fact, my hay fever was so bad that as maybe an excuse, I kind of blamed it on flunking or not doing very well on one of my courses. That's why they mandated that I did a little bit better on one of the courses before I can go on to a PhD research program. And so I said, well, what am I supposed to do? And guess what? It was about then a wonderful friend, and I have to credit this to him because he was a nurse who was working in the intensive care unit and the emergency unit at the hospital that I work in. And during the long nights of being on call and waiting for emergencies to come in, we end up having a lot of long talks. And it was this fellow, Dr. Paul Lavudusky, today he's a naturopath, who told me all these funny stuff about homeopathic medicine and naturopathic medicine. I said, gee, come on, I don't believe in this. The Chinese guys, they talk about yin and yang, and I told him that I ran away from all of these stuff. And he was quite surprised when I did not believe in something, yet I was very fluent conversing in traditional Chinese medicine, telling him about, the basic theory or, hypothesis of traditional Chinese medicine. And he actually got me to speak in an in-service to tell the nurses about traditional Chinese medicine. And he said, Jim, you just don't have to believe in anything, just tell us what you know. How about that? I said, okay. So I learned more at that point about traditional Chinese, about homeopathic medicine. And funny, I said traditional Chinese medicine because it was because of a project doing research on ginseng that I decided maybe there is some chemicals in herbs that might be of use. It was about that time when I also started reading up a little bit more about herbs, about the different alkaloids that are found in plants and things like that. And but then again, my mind was set. I said, okay, maybe if I become a medical doctor, I'll be of great use in research, and wouldn't it be wonderful? And in fact, I'm naming these names and they're quite real. And it was about that time when I met a couple of wonderful friends, and one of them was Dr. Peter Tams. Dr. Peter Tams was a medical doctor who graduated from Germany, who was trained in Germany. And as you know, in Germany, medical doctors were trained in a lot of what they call biological medicine. And it was about that time that his license was taken away for advising patients to go get some vitamin C. I couldn't believe this. I said, this is ridiculous. And my story of vitamin C was, of course, back then I also said, oh, come on, Linus Pauling must be getting old, even though he's a wonderful biochemist, wonderful researcher. It's really only as simple as ascorbic acid. I mean, it can quench some free radicals, and what good is it going to do? And but in fact, looking back, the reason why I was credited for the research project was because I made a mistake in making the buffer solution for stabilizing the enzyme that we were going to study. For a long time, historically, nobody was ever able to stabilize this enzyme called S-adenosine methyltransferase. And because of that little mistake, I misread the formula, and I put 1,000 times more vitamin C in the buffering solution. And by golly, we ended up with a very stable enzyme that we could study. And that went on and became a major discovery in the field of enzymology. And I said, there is something to it, to vitamins. And also my professor actually told me, he said, Jim, you know something, this SAM, S-adenosine methionine, one day might have very profound medical implications. I said, well, yeah, so what, you know? Well, back then you're into all these nitty-gritty things, you know, and into these molecular science. You know, I didn't think very much in the global sense, except when I realized that they would take someone's license away for advising his patients to take vitamin C. I was pretty distraught. And then I met another fellow. His name is Dr. Owen Swartz. Dr. Swartz was actually a professor. Can you imagine, a professor in McGill University Medical School? And he was basically told by the disciplinary board by the medical board to go back for further education. And the reason why was he was one of the first advocates of patients not using synthetic thyroid medication and use natural thyroid medication. Can you believe? This guy was discredited so badly that even today he cannot practice as a medical doctor. He's totally ostracized. He's just writing books. All right. So, anyways, I was pretty disheartened, and then I talked to Paul. I said, Paul, what am I supposed to do? Go back to China or what? You know. So it's amazing. Paul said, you know, there's this profession called naturopathic medicine. Why don't you try it? So just like due diligence as a researcher, I did all my homework. I looked into the law. I looked into what it meant to be a naturopathic doctor in the province of British Columbia, where I was at. I'm still practicing in BC, in fact, today. And I took the law. I said, this is a piece of what? You know, it's ridiculous. The law was so antiquated. And I started visiting all of these so-called naturopathic doctors in town. And the first, you know, some of the guys that I look at, they were doing something really funny, what they call Vega testing. You know, I said, what? You can do what with this? This is amazing. And actually there was even one guy who was just writing the word for the homeopathic medicine, stick it into a slot and put obviously a tube of water in front of this little contraption. Push a button and red light goes off, went off. He would say, this is your medicine for the patient. I said, wow, this is amazing. I said, I don't know about this. Wait a minute here. So, in fact, what I did was I did some more checking and realized, yes, there's this whole field of biological medicine that one can do. And I can probably utilize some of my know-how in maybe molecular genetics or molecular science somehow in this whole mess. You know, even though poor Dr. Kleiner really wanted me to become a good internist. He said, Jim, you might have what it takes. It's just gonna take a little bit of guts, you know, because he was trained in the old Vienna school. Back then he talked about putting patients on a little bit of multiple vitamins as an internist. He talked about personality of diseases. You know, he can tell the difference between Crohn's disease patient and an ulcerative colitis patient from how they feel by asking certain key questions, which I found was absolutely fascinating, and they were all confirmed by the scoping, you know, and he was a great teacher, just absolutely incredible. So I took this piece of law and I said, gee, I better talk to a few more friends to see what this is all about. You know, something when some of my lawyer friends look at this and said, Jimmy, this is incredible. This law basically gives you an open field. And that's why the profession is that way, because it's open, it's up for grabs, you can do anything you want. That's why it's not recognized, even though it's licensed by a provincial law, by a provincial act. Yet it's not recognized by anybody, simply because according to this law, you can do anything you want except surgery and anesthesia, and it's precisely what is said in the law. Is we are licensed as physicians in the province of BC. We're licensed to diagnose and to treat with natural preparations and medicines and substances and administer them too. That's the amazing thing. And the only thing we're not allowed to do is to do surgery and apply anesthetics. I said, fine, I don't mind at all. So I put my foot down finally and enrolled into Bastille. Right now it's called Bastille University. Back then it was the John Bastille College of Naturopathic Medicine. After I went in, I kind of look at the teacher and say, are you sure you know what you're teaching almost? Actually, sadly, I challenged them. I gave them such a bad time. It's just absolutely incredible. So I basically challenged a lot of the courses, and I crashed through a 4-year program in 2.5 years. And at first my mandate was, I'm not going to listen to these yo-yos. I'm just going to get my license and I'm going to do my thing. So basically, and I guess it turned out to be almost what I wanted. After I got my license, I started my practice, and back then no naturopath in BC were doing any IV therapy. They were too scared. They don't know what chelation therapy was. They're not even ordering any lab tests simply because the MDs in the province will not honor their order at all, and basically MDs won't even talk to naturopaths. And it's interesting because of my background. Right now my clinic actually has 2 hyperbaric oxygen chambers. I have my own X-ray. We have 2 sets of diagnostic ultrasound in place, even though not used a lot because we're not having these things for the sake of doing them, but for the sake of tracking how patients are doing. If the system would pay for an ultrasound, I'll read the report or look at the films. That's ordered by the medical doctor. There's no problem. We actually have our own lab, our own laboratory that would do not only blood counts, look at the immune system, do the regular liver function test, kidney function test. We would do also a lot of a little bit more sophisticated tests such as tumor markers, actually we are one of the first labs in Canada that would do a free PSA. In fact, we can go into it later, but when you have a total PSA, it's kind of meaningless. You do need the % free PSA to tell you a little bit more about what your prostate cells are doing. Anyways, and we also have, of course, I have 2 sets of dark field microscopes, and I certainly don't believe that you can find parasites in dark field microscopes. And of course, I have a bright field microscope, and from time to time, I would even request for the tissue slides to be reviewed because I've been trained by this crazy pathologist in Medicine Hat, Dr. Harris. He's still somewhere in Alberta, and I, I can't say that I would be qualified to write any pathology report, but I would definitely look at everything very critically. And we also have the softer testing, such as the biological terrain assessment. We have the Heidelberg system to test for stomach acid. With very cautiously, I would order doing electrodermal screening on patients to look for allergies, meridian imbalances, and perhaps sometimes I would desensitize patients against offending substances and compounds. And also we have probably the one and the only infrared scanner that I brought in from China that uses liquid nitrogen to cool down the temperature of the camera case, so that we have a very sensitive survey down to a temperature difference of 0.05 degrees Celsius to track the surface temperature so that we can spot check and also compare what's going on in cancer cases as well as other chronic diseases. Of course, we have other contraptions such as the CRT, computerized responsive response tomography. We do our own electrocardiogram. We do our own interpretation of the electrocardiogram as well. We've grown to about 12 staffs now, and there's 6 of my staff. They're actually qualified medical doctors who are not licensed in Canada, and they range all the way from a Filipino lady who used to be an anesthesiologist in the Philippines to a fellow who had worked 10 years as a surgeon from Taiwan. For some strange reason, he's sort of not making as much money and happy to help us out in the clinic. Yes, we do chelation, we do intravenous hydrogen peroxide, we do intravenous Laetrile, we do somatostatin treatment or the octreotide treatment, very similar to Dr. DeBella. We do insulin induction therapy, not so much of hypoglycemic treatment or the potentiation treatment, but we do drop patients' blood sugar level down in the 20 to 30 milligram per deciliter range very safely and carefully. We have a stat lab to monitor patients' sodium, potassium, and blood glucose very quickly, very carefully. It's a little bit crazy, but we're awfully careful that we actually run 30 IV pumps in the office. Today, I would say it's very nice that we have a lot of cooperation from a number of medical doctors and oncologists in town. In fact, certain oncologist who is the head of a oncology center that's apart from the main cancer group in Vancouver. He is so open-minded and so cooperative. Sometimes I actually running the tumor marker panels for him when the system does not allow him to order these tests. And in fact, in order to treat cancer, I believe that we should take a very, very practical approach with the patient's welfare, patient's well-being, patient's quality of life, and practicality all in mind. And at times I do believe that chemo has its place, and I do believe that when we need to move in with heavy guns, as long as we have all the backside covered in terms of supporting the immune system and the detox mechanism, I still feel very strongly that it has its place, and debulking in certain cases, such as using surgery to decrease the tumor load in a hurry, definitely is very, very important. And in fact, there is really nothing wrong with radiation. We know that it might be bad, but then again, for local control and then for palliative treatment, it definitely has its place, except there are certain things that we need to do to alleviate the side effect, and also by understanding what radiation is doing, we need to do things to have it covered. For instance, recently, we have a very wonderful patient who has mesothelioma that was a result of asbestos that he was exposed to in the past. And we know that there's really no good treatment for mesothelioma. However, we managed to cooperate with this wonderful oncologist. We put him on cisplatin and gemcitabine, even though it was meant to be a trial. We didn't really expect that much out of it. Of course, when I treat a certain cancer patient, we don't have any protocols, I don't have any cookbooks. We always start from scratch. We look at the patient very carefully. We do a very thorough history taking. We will take the family history, work history, Sometimes I even have to go back to whether they were breastfed or not to find out, to speculate what their immune status might be. And I have to go through a lot of timeline questioning in terms of what kind of stress was the person subjected to figure out the timeline in terms of how come the cancer occurred. Anyways, and then we'll go ahead and individualize very carefully and have all of the basics covered in order to go ahead to not only attack the cancer but also to support the system to help us fight. So in this particular case, of course, we did all the workup first. So oncologists kind of gave me the signal and say, okay, Jim, I think I'm going to try this. I say, gee, it's not going to do very much, but what else is there to do, and I talked to this guy. He said, no, Jim, I just want to give it a go. He's a young guy in his early 50s. And so we did all the workup. I had him all prepared for the chemo. We move in with the chemo. We monitor him very closely between the oncologist and myself, and we co-treated the case. Surprise! The PET scan actually showed no cancer activity. Actually, this is a workman's compensation case. In the American sense, it's an L&I case. Everything was paid for by the government, and the doctor from WCB, that's the workman's comp, or the L&I board, was so surprised. They paid him every single bit of the expenses for a panel in UCLA to go over the case to see what happened because of the surprising result of the PET scan being totally negative. A PET scan, by the way, is a way to track down cancer activity without having any formation of tumor. It's a way that they will inject a little bit of glucose into your vein, and these glucose molecules are being labeled with a little bit of radioisotope. These are very weak radioisotope that is so unstable that it will be gone in 24 hours time, so they have to prepare the reagent literally only 24 hours before you go in. So it's very safe. And so after they inject this radioactive or radioisotope labeled glucose into your vein, they will go ahead and scan through your entire body to look for a higher concentration of these radioisotope, assuming that there's a higher uptake of the glucose molecules by the cancer cells or by the more active cells. Of course, you have to, take into consideration certain areas of your body that would have a high uptake of the glucose, such as our brain, our heart, and also, of course, because glucose is excreted very fast and this radioisotope is excreted very quickly from our urine, and the bladder is always going to glow. Anyway, so basically by tracking down where are the high uptake of this glucose, you would suspect where the cancer activities are. Sometimes you can find cancer cells without the formation of any tumor yet. And I wonder if anybody knows that a cancer, by the time it gets to 1 centimeter in diameter, which is the clinical detectable limit of most of these imaging techniques, including MRI and CT and ultrasound, there are 1 billion cancer cells in it. And in fact, anything smaller than half a centimeter, we usually have a hard time detecting them. And PET scan is something that is very useful to detect cancer activity before the formation of such a tumor. And the fact that it's negative in this particular case, it really threw a loop. And it really opened the eyes of not only in the oncology field in Vancouver, even in UCLA. They're saying, hey, what's happening here? Maybe we have to do something into looking into alternative medicine and complementary medicine. And in fact, it's very exciting. In fact, Dr. Jerome Block, MD, who had been the head of oncology at UCLA Harbor, that's the medical school in UCLA, he had looked into my practice for a number of years and became so interested that he, in fact, has certain plans to go ahead and incorporate complementary medicine, perhaps in the UCLA Oncology Center, which is very exciting. Anyway, so certainly there are a lot of exciting things that are happening in the field of complementary and alternative medicine. I think what it takes It's not so much of we holding on to our so-called little things. In fact, if you look at what I have gone through, humbly, I mean, I don't know everything. But then again, it's very interesting that I learned the basics of something that was so empirical and so old and so traditional, and simply because I did not have an open mind to receive it, or to go ahead to find ways of convincing myself that this is something which is very much valid. I end up looking into the other side, and yet that did not really give me all of the solutions, and ended up now coming a full circle. And in fact, a lot of the hypotheses in traditional Chinese medicine are explainable nowadays in scientific terms. Like, for instance, yin and yang, we can look at it as a balance between psychic AMP and psychic GMP. And in fact, it's been verified and it's been well researched in countries that are interested in looking into these modalities, including Japan and China. And I believe it definitely has a lot of credence in it. Anyways, a little bit of personal history was that myself, back in 1996, I was looking, actually back then, even though I treated a lot of cancer cases before 1996, prior to 1996, I took a view of treating cancer as though I was treating cancer. When a cancer patient came in, I forgot that there was a person there, even though I did a lot of alternative treatment. I was attacking the cancer. And it was back in 1996 that I found some of my own markers were high. In fact, there's a test called AMAS, anti-malignant antibody assay, and just for fun, I thought I sent a sample of my own blood in, and the result came back very high. It was frightening. And then right away I said, gosh, physician heal myself. I've never really given myself a thorough check. Immediately I put myself through all the testings I put my patients through, and I had a parameter called LDH that was in the thousands, and usually it should only be in the hundreds. And I said, good gracious, I better look at myself a little bit more carefully. And then I realized that I was a little bit tired when, in the middle of a day of the practice, and also had about 2 weeks worth of night sweats. And I knew then night sweat, I thought I was maybe just had too many blankets on, just like any other patient, never took notice. And then I realized that it could have been something what we call B symptoms. B symptoms are signs when your immune system is being overwhelmed. Okay, and B symptoms came from the fact that maybe the B lymphocytes are being overly stressed. All right, and I went for MRI and I found a 1.5 centimeter mass in my own neck. Talk about saving your own neck. And my choice was, of course, to do a needle biopsy and maybe to go on to chemotherapy and retire. And maybe I said, gosh, this is terrible, because I've seen wonderful results of that. The reason why I could go on was because there were some cases that had very good results, including actually one of the pancreatic cancer in Vancouver that I co-worked with this oncologist that had fantastic results, and it was another turning point in my life. So I decided to really change my lifestyle and treating myself, and then I realized there are a lot of other things to work on, including the emotional aspect, the attitude. That was, I learned about Dr. Symington's psychotherapy when I was in Bastille, and I thought, oh, come on, how can you talk someone into getting well? And that's when I realized that having a positive attitude, when you have the right mindset is so important in healing. And again, other than learning more about being positive, maintaining a positive attitude, being assertive, taking control, and not being afraid of taking steps forward. And that was when I started not only to empower myself, but also went ahead and empower a lot of my patients to take positive steps. If it's surgery, if we lay everything on the table, that is the right thing to do. Don't regret a single minute and go forward. But make sure that we rationalize everything, look at everything without leaving a single stone unturned, and step forward and try your best to have all of the angles and basics covered. And that is very important in cancer management. And it's really no big deal. We all get cancer one of these days. In fact, another lesson that I learned was that I remember way back when I did a lot of autopsies in Medicine Hat General Hospital, there were at least over half of the corpse that we did that we found signs of cancer. And these people never been diagnosed or known to have cancer. Never in a million years would they have thought of having cancer. Like, amazingly, I also learned from Dr. Block, with his 35 years of oncology experience, I was surprised. He said, you know something, a lot of these women who are diagnosed of ovarian cancer, they don't really have ovarian cancer. A lot of them really have a condition called peritoneal carcinomatosis. In fact, I remember back then, these whole hunk of grape-like nodules that we yank out from these people's peritoneum. And they were hard like a piece of rock. They are like tiny little pebbles. Cancer lumps won't give because the cells are so packed and they're so dense, And these people live comfortably, we learned a lot of things from patients. One lesson to learn was that I have a patient and I'm still treating him, and this patient was known to have colon cancer. And interestingly enough, he never responded to conventional treatment. He never responded to immunological treatment, and yet his tumor marker would be climbing. And it's been 3 years now. His CEA has climbed up to over 3,000. And something amazingly, when they repeated the CAT scan finally, only a few months ago, and one of the oncologists that his regular oncologist thought, gosh, I have my hands up, I don't know what to do with you anymore, Randy, and said, why don't you go and see this oncologist who's a little bit more investigative. And this turned out to be an oncologist who is very open-minded and investigative, and yet she is really a specialist in feminine type of cancer, in female cancer. And at first he was a little bit puzzled why he's seeing this girl. And when this oncologist looked at his CT film, he said, you know something, I don't understand this. You're a man, but your CT looked like you have ovarian cancer. Then it dawned on everybody that we're looking in the wrong place. In fact, this fella might not have colon cancer. What he might have is really peritoneum carcinomatosis, which can also happen in men. It dawned on people, oh my goodness, we better do another tumor marker. Guess what? I looked back in his records. Not very good doctor. And I realized that I did do a CA-125 on him by mistake, which is meant to be, a marker of ovarian cancer. And I did not look at it any further because I thought my staff made a mistake, that's all. And it turned out he had a high marker, ovarian cancer. So right away, we said, okay, we're going to have to switch. So right away, we plunged into very, very intensive immunotherapy instead of trying to kill the cancer, because from what I've learned from all these wonderful people who had a lot of experience with this so-called carcinomatosis is that you cannot kill them. This type of cancer you cannot kill. So there's no point in dropping an atomic bomb. There's no point in going in with machine guns. You have to be nice to them. You have to train them, to turn them into differentiated cells instead. You have to try to do something to stop them from spreading, from crawling around the organs. And then we have to really concentrate on beefing up our police force and move in. We have to rely a little bit heavy on our immune system to kill them. And the news was only last week, first time ever, I couldn't believe this, his tumor marker dropped by 500. That was the CEA. We're waiting for the CA-125 result to see what it is, to see what it was. It's amazing. So treating cancer, there are a lot of angles. Of course, we don't just treat cancer in our clinic. We also treat a lot of multiple sclerosis. We treat a lot of neurological diseases, including paraplegia. We have treated also a number of kids with cerebral palsy and hyperbaric, which I learned from Dr. Steenblok, but then again I expanded it a little bit further, and we're also treating a lot of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis successfully with hyperbaric oxygen treatment. Of course, it's not as straightforward as just getting someone to go through a series of hyperbaric oxygen treatment. Of course, there's a lot of other modalities that has to go along with it. And the reason why I had to buy 2 hyperbaric oxygen chambers was because my ex-wife was paralyzed in a car accident because of a C6 compression fracture, burst fracture and a C7 compression fracture. And when I found out that there's a possibility that hyperbaric oxygen might modulate the activity of fibroblasts to do some healing and repairing of bodily cells, including maybe neurological tissues. We try a few hyperbaric oxygen treatment, and I decided to buy my own hyperbaric oxygen chamber for the sake of treating her. And you know something, it's amazing that today she is walking with a walker, and she has full bladder and bowel control. And in fact, even CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, expressed interest at one time maybe to do a special documentary on her, and decided it was too hot to handle. They decided not to do it. And talk about too hot to handle. There was a patient that we had treated that had cancer recurrence 3 times, that she should have been dead according to the conventional field, something like 6 years ago. And she's in very good shape. She's in remission. Of course, we did something special with her. We did a private project, which we, thank goodness, we might not have to do it anymore because of the fact that these wonderful antigen-specific transfer factors are available nowadays. For that particular person, I ran out of rope. So what we did was I had read up on Dr. Futenberg's work on transfer factors, and decided to coach her to buy a pregnant cow that was about 7 weeks to freshening, and we actually injected blood that we drew from her into the peritoneum of this cow, and then we collected the colostrum, and that was part of the treatment as antigen or tumor antigen specific transfer factors to treat her. And the story was so moving that a national television network called Women's Television Network, WTN, decided to move an entire camera crew all the way from Winnipeg across the country to film at her home, at my clinic, and they did an entire documentary on her healing path. And today I have a letter of apology, apologizing from their legal department that maybe it's not very timely to air such a documentary, and the documentary was meant to be for a show called Beyond Medicine. So I can kind of joke at it to say they dropped the ball because it's a little too hard, that this is really beyond medicine. Anyways, so there are these, I can ramble on and on and on and on about all these wonderful stories But with the invitation of Ralph, I thought it would be a wonderful thing to share. Maybe a little bit of my life story, maybe a little bit of where I came from, maybe who I am, maybe what I've done. It's a clinic that's tucked away in Vancouver. We try to keep a very low profile simply because maybe the hostility out there, maybe a lot of things that we do, can be controversial, and of course I can go on and on and talk about a lot of other things, including we also modulate the ratio of dephosphorylation and phosphorylation with, can you believe, a compound very similar to ATP, adenosine triphosphate, to downregulate the oncogene expression, and we also use homeopathic cancer preparations to counteract to effectively suppress the expression of the oncogene, and at the same time we also use single-strand DNA to increase the repair rate of DNAs that have been nicked or damaged, and also at the same time we also support patients through radiation treatment by giving them intravenous hydrogen peroxide, which nobody would ever even think of, to actually effectively increase the sustainable interstitial oxygen level, so that there's a higher kill rate by the radiation, and at the same time there will be an increased repair rate of the nicked DNA sequence of the immune cells. And in fact it prompted the cancer hospital local in town to start a trial of allowing patients who are going through radiation treatment to breathe a mixture of 80% oxygen and 20% carbon dioxide called carbogen. And in fact they're seeing a wonderfully increased cure rate, and the side effect of radiation is so minimized. It's just so much less, that it's absolutely incredible. So I believe that there's only one medicine on earth that we need to get to, instead of taking sides, instead of saying, who we are or how come you're over there. And I guess the main thing is we just need to do our best to do whatever we can practically to help the people that we care for.